Greetings, everyone, on this beautiful summer day. I'm here in Washington, D.C., where it's a nice 92 degrees, and we're just enjoying all this beautiful heat. I sure like it better than the cold, so I'm not really complaining. All right, for everyone who's been on this forum before, I greet you as well. And let me identify myself properly. I am Baba Mosi Matsimila, president of the Woodson Banneker Jackson Bay Division, UNIACL RC 2020 here in Washington, D.C. And I'm co-host with this forum with the vice president, Baba Congo Africa. And this is our second forum for the month of July. And we have some guests, two guests here, presenters, and you know, some very smart people, very active people in the community. And we're going to discuss with them what they're doing in this issue of violence in the Black community, and you know, that includes police violence and any other violence you can think about. But we will let them do the talking, because this is a friendly conversation, but they're guests, and we just want to know them to tell us, you know, what they do and what we need to do, and how we can all work together to find solutions to this violent situation we're in. All right, you know, the UNIA, when we start a program, we have some rituals that we have to do. And let me start with the first one here, which is the UNIA pledge to the flag. I will recite it, and just, you know, I'm not going to ask you to put your hand to your chest or anything, but just be mindful that this is something we take seriously. I commit my body, mind, and spirit to the protection, defense, and security of the red, black, and green. I dedicate my life to the redemption of Mother Africa and the liberation of her scattered Black children. I accept for myself and my descendants the teachings of universal African nationalism, and I promise that our children will be instilled with the purpose and knowledge of themselves as African people, in order that the cause of our struggle will neither falter nor fail, until all Black people are free and united through one God, one aim, one destiny. Of course, many of you know who we are and what we do, but for those who are new to us and who need to understand what our goals are, let me read or recite to you the preamble of the Constitution of the UNIACL, which gives you a picture that you should that should make you really understand that we're about African people, and we're about redemption of African people. Universal Negro Improvement Association and African Communities League is a social, friendly, humanitarian, charitable, educational, institutional, constructive, and expansive society, and is founded by persons desiring to the utmost to work for the general uplift of the Negro peoples of the world. And the members pledge themselves to do all in their power to conserve the rights of their noble race and to respect the rights of all mankind, believing always in the brotherhood of man and the fatherhood of God. The motto of the organization is one God, one aim, one destiny. Therefore, Let justice be done to all mankind, realizing that if the strong oppresses the weak, confusion and discontent will ever mark the path of man. With love, faith, and charity towards all, the reign of peace and plenty will be heralded into the world, and the generations of men shall be called blessed. I must also tell you that this was written, or this was promulgated, because it was part of our Constitution, 102 years ago in New York City. And so if you find some of the language rather ancient, that's because we have changed nothing about it. It's what those people, our ancestors, most of them are, if not all, who were involved in putting that together. And we do believe in it sincerely. We work towards the goals set by this Constitution and this preamble. Okay, so let me go to the primary objective of tonight, and that is to have this presentation by our two guests. Attorney Kay Bonner was an organizer for the DC Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression, as a housing attorney and a Florida native with a history of organizing against police crimes, beginning after the Trayvon Martin incident, who was killed by the racist vigilante George Zimmerman, that is in 2012, and also organizing as part of the Dream Defenders and the DCAA, calling for an end to violence against oppressed communities and justice for Black and brown people abused by police. We also have with us another person of like mind, I should say, who is also an organizer. And I will let him tell us a little bit. I'll ask both of them to say, a little more about themselves. And I'm speaking of Dante O'Hara. I don't have much to say about him, but that I know he's quite an activist in Washington, D.C. So, Dante, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here, brother.
Okay, good to see you. Good to see you. All right, the last time I saw you, I think it was in front of the White House, and I can't remember. I think you had a megaphone in your hand and some other things, but I do know that you are quite some activist person here in DC. And so tonight we are here to discuss a very important feature of our communities, that is gun violence. And we're going to ask our guest presenters to shape it for us as to what they think is either causing or promoting or is encouraging this kind of issue. But before that, I'm going to ask our good brother Dante to say a little about himself and in his activities in those organizations that he deals with. Brother?
Yeah, thank you, brother Baba Mosey. Appreciate you inviting me and the rest of the UNIA local. It's an honor to be here. My name is Dante O'Hara. I'm originally from California. Also lived some time in Ohio for my graduate degree, and recently moved to DC, the DC area in 2019. So I've been here for about 3 years. My political home is in the communist movement. within the Communist Party of this country, and also we're a coalition member of the DC Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression, which the national organization was founded out of the struggle to free Angela Davis in the early 1970s. And I'm also very involved with a political education project called the Claudia Jones School for Political Education, where we basically doing working class education for folks in the DMV area, particularly talking about issues that aren't taught in basically capitalist academy, if you put it lightly. And you know, talking about issues of racism, class, gender, and a lot of other issues that affects the working class, and trying to give folks the tools to, one, unite, but also advance their interests against the ruling class of this country as well. So I've been active in the movement probably 2015 or so, like a little bit after the Ferguson uprisings, but I've been more activated probably post the Trump election. And, you know, I've mostly been in school, so that's been the difficulties, but now that I'm out of school, it's been more easy for me to do more community work and get involved with the movement. So I've been heavily active in the DC area since I've been here, and looking to get, you know, develop more relationships and continue broadening the movement and reaching different forces, and also basically all working class people in this area, and trying to get folks organized in different ways. So I know I can't do that alone. So, you know, it's all about, you know, developing coalitions and partnerships, and you know, uniting on issues that folks agree on, even though we may not agree how to, you know, approach those issues, but at least unite on the issue at hand, and come to some action in unity to advance, you know, our cause on these issues. So that's just my 2 cents there.
Oh, great. You don't look like you've got all these years of activity behind you, my brother. But that's good to know. He also is had a Ph.D., right? And so don't because he looks so young, don't think he doesn't have certain things behind him. So are you an attorney as well?
No, I'm a.
Oh, okay.
My academic background is in physics, so.
In physics.
Yeah, but you know, I don't wave the PhD around. It's kind of, you know.
Well, you know, listen, my brother, it's your achievement, and I don't think you need to hide that from the public. Don't forget, there was a very famous man from Germany who was also in physics, and was unbeknownst to a lot of people, they don't understand that he was very politically active. So yes, now KB, can we hear from you now at this point?
Yes. My apologies for having my camera off. I have a pretty bad connection right now, so I may be switching over to my iPad later. But thank you so much, Baba Mosi, for having me. Very appreciative to, you know, be on this panel, to have this conversation with y'all. You know, as I had in my little bio, I started doing organizing and activism in 2012, coming out of the death of Trayvon Martin. You know, and that was a moment that was radical for me, that politically activated me, and that, you know, opened my mind up to truly the conditions that, you know, we as Black people and as members of the African diaspora face in, you know, the colonial empire known as the United States. You know, it's really an eye-opening moment for me. So, you know, I've carried the memory of Trayvon Martin and of other Black and brown people who have been brutally murdered by the state. I've carried that in my heart and the work that I do. And I try to, imbue that rage and that passion into, a focus so that, we can organize our communities and that we can, actually achieve the transformational change that, we need to escape, colonial oppression and, violence and suffering and things like that. As it comes to your question about, gun violence and its effect on the Black community or, diagnosing, this problem, I think, like everything in the United States, it comes from a history and a legacy of, white supremacy and racism. Gun culture in a lot of ways is based on, white supremacist thinking that explicitly, includes the, violent repression of Black people and, denying Black people basic human rights and dignities through the use of, terroristic violence. In the 70 years of Jim Crow, that was primarily achieved through lynchings and through terror campaigns where essentially, white vigilante mobs would go in and, destroy entire Black enclaves. We have many prominent examples, but two that immediately comes to mind is Rosewood, Florida, and Tulsa, Oklahoma. There was also a Black enclave in what is now Central Park in New York City that was also destroyed by a white vigilante mob. And I think that legacy has continued on in the form of, violence against Black and brown people, Black people specifically in the form of, police brutality and, police crimes, murdering unarmed Black people or just, it honestly doesn't matter if they're unarmed or not, but just murdering Black people in the street in the most effective way that they do that is through the use of, their gun and their authority that is imbued to them through the state. So, for us, a lot of people will talk about crime within the Black community or gun violence within the Black community. To me, I think it's important to frame these things in the context of white supremacy and in the context of, the state essentially importing suffering and violence into our communities so that, we remain distracted or, unfocused and aren't able to, come together to overthrow the state and to achieve a better life for ourselves. So these are just tools that is used to, support this, empire through a very complex divide and conquer method. So that's all I have for now.
Okay, thank you, KB. Well, that's a good start. Now let me ask Dante, do you have anything to add to that, or do you want to put your piece forward here, your intro, so to speak?
Yeah, well, I agree with what KB is saying, but I think we gotta. Well, KB basically hit the nail on the head. So this country was founded, the United States, or what we so-call the United States today, was founded on, African slavery and genocide of the native population, right? And these things never necessarily ended, right? In 1951, there was a well-known communist lawyer by the name of William L. Patterson, and along with the Civil Rights Congress, who popularized the term civil rights that came later in the 1960s. Himself, a lot of Black women, including Mary Church Terrell and Paul Robeson and Louise Thompson Patterson and others, wrote this about 200-page or so petition to the United Nations, basically documenting all of the genocidal actions that the U.S. government was complacent in within this country, while they were abroad saying that they were fighting for democracy and human rights, right? So in 1951, Paul Robeson went to the UN in New York, and Patterson went to the UN overseas in Europe, and he was basically ostracized, followed by the CIA, and arrested when he came back to the States after he gave this petition to the UN. And it documented all these like lynchings and police murders and frame ups of Black men and women, and these basically extrajudicial killings by the U.S. governments and the monopolies that fuel the United States government within this country. So when we talk about violence, like how KB was saying, we have to kind of go back to the beginning of this country, right? Which is, the settler colonial violence that, led to the basically foundation of this country, and the slave population that was here, and what became, there was obviously the Civil War and the Reconstruction period that was temporary. And then there was the betrayal of Reconstruction that led to Jim Crow and, more hundreds of years of oppression of Black people, right? In my view, this is all sort of a subset or, developing what some might term as like American or US fascism, right? And, the US has become the biggest empire in history of this world. And by empire, I mean imperialists, monopolists, empire, where it basically cannot extract any more from its own country. It must extract from other countries around the world. And, with the Monroe Doctrine and et cetera, they basically police this hemisphere in a sense, and also extract from the global South, which includes other Africans, Asian, Middle Eastern, and Latin American and Caribbean peoples, who are still fighting against this sort of colonial and imperial relationship, right, with the United States empire and other Western European countries. But what I'm trying to get at is imperialism has supported, war and fascism abroad, right? And by imperialism, I mean the monopolists of this country, going back to, not only the colonial periods in Africa and elsewhere, but also within Europe. Henry Ford and other monopolies, funded Hitlerism and Mussolini and all these folks within the European fascist framework. And, this is similar things happening now, right? You got the US propping up dictatorships or supporting them, but so-called fighting for democracy, right? And, this stuff is basically, as Malcolm X said, chicken come home to roost, right? So like, it's coming back to us with, internalized and domestic violence within this country, with the weapons trades and, you have weapons on the streets. You got the 1033 program where military surplus weapons go into police departments, right? So now you got, the communities, the Black communities and Latino communities are already occupied with a lot of police presence, right? To basically gentrify and displace people from their homes that they've been living in for many years, and put people into these, what people used to call ghettos, but it's, this process continues to happen. And but now they have, full on military grade weaponry from war, tanks, that the conversation we're going to get into with Jalen Walker. The protesters were going to the mayor's house and they brought tanks to basically suppress the protest, right? And, this is all basically surplus from war and imperialism abroad in these other countries. And it's spilling out into fascist movements within the United States, with these white militias, which you can go all the way back to the slave catchers and all that, which has a link directly to police departments as well. So, and, the Ku Klux Klan, but you got these like fascist movements, the Proud Boys of today, the 3 Percenters, all these things. And they're directly linked to these mass shooters that are murdering Black people, like in Buffalo, for example, but also children, women, etc. as well. So, you know, there's a major problem, but there's a direct link between these mass shooters, police violence, and the violence that the U.S. empire, you know, perpetrates abroad while supposedly championing democracy around the world, which is actually promoting fascistic dictatorships and controlling full economies through economic sanctions and through IMF loans and neo-colonialism in Africa and elsewhere, and the list goes on, right? And you know, it's just, yeah. So I don't want to talk too much. I'm sure there's gonna be some more directed questions, but you know, that's just my sort of 2 cents.
Okay, now, thank you, Dante. I want to let people know that these 2 guests, you know, they're giving the opinion of what can I say, the generational opinion, and how they're seeing it. It might be opinion of other generations, but let me say why it was so good to have these 2 young people on. Yeah, KB, we understand that that kind of feedback coming through. Okay, what it is that we have had before on programs dealing with violence in the communities, and the discussion was mainly with those of an older generation. Some people probably above the half a century mark in age, and but we have not been hearing from younger people as to what they think should be done or what they think are the causes, and especially since they're out there as the ones who are most active. And so we need to hear from this group, this generation, who are so very active out there. So this is why when the choice to speak to people regarding it, we've gone to people who are really active out there and who are in the trenches, so to speak, and should understand what is going on with violence. Now, let me put this start from a point where I was kind of baffled, or let's say shocked at some statistics I got out of 2020. I think this was this came from either the CDC or I think it was. It says young Black males between the ages of 15 to 34 are especially disproportionately impacted by the violence, and they make up 2% of the population, but accounting for 38% of all gun homicide fatalities. 2%, but they're 38% of all gun fatalities. Their rate of firearm homicide was more than 21 times higher than white males. Tell me, what do you see in that? Can you comment on those statistics? What do you think is happening here? I mean, you've already mentioned that, but yeah. Kristen, do you want to take that? Maybe?
Yeah, I think it's, can you hear me?
Yes, clearly.
I think it's a microcosm of like a larger system of violence and repression against, you know, Black people. You know, when you deprive a community or people of, access to resources, access to education, access to, well-paying jobs. When you essentially put them in a fishbowl, or you put them in, circumstances that are quite frankly like inhumane, you have lower outcomes essentially for, that population, especially combined with efforts to over police. Efforts to ensure that, police are embedded within the community, and act as, occupying forces for, that community, to keep them under, the thumb of the state, essentially. So to me, it's not, these statistics are not surprising, they're disheartening. And they, depending on who's reading them, can cause people to take on or to repeat, very anti-Black things about, young Black men, or just about Black people in general, as if, we're savages or something, when really, I think this is just a microcosm and a effect of, systemic oppression, and brutalization, of, people, to, quite frankly, to blunt their revolutionary potential. Because, one thing that scared the state more than anything was the liberation movements of the 70s and the Black liberation movement, that put fear in the boots of, the people who run the state apparatus. And I think, some of the things that we've seen done to the Black community in the terms of importing drugs, importing, violence, taking away resources, taking away funding, and money, and, entrenching, segregation in a more covert manner. I think these are all things that were done to blunt the revolutionary potential of Black people in the United States, to prevent them from being able to organize and, rise up against, the state. So.
Okay, I see that as certainly an aspect of the problem. But you mentioned, being in these in ghettoized communities, so to speak, and holding as a holding area where you keep poor people under control. But the violence, let's say we speak about what has happened with police violence. That has not, a lot of these people who are being shot are people who come from homes, and they may be educated, or they're not really true or truly part of this ghettoized situation. They may not have come up in a full country. Isn't it racism? I mean, isn't it racism, the racist content of the mind of those who are shooting? I mean, and I'm talking about the police violence. Let's go to that. Now, and the injecting of weapons into the communities where people who may not have the hopes of those who are at a higher level of in economic status, self-hatred coming in there, and they're doing that. It's a complex thing. Can we put all that into just what the government or state is promoting, or is it something, an inculcation of of hatred coming from way back. You know, you've mentioned that before, but yeah, wouldn't that be more the aspect of what is, you know, creating the violence?
In my opinion, I think it all definitely plays a role. I think that, you know, we are raised in the same white supremacist society that tells us very negative things about, you know, ourselves, and that tries to, you know, erase our history, and to, you know, put a false narrative there in its place. You know, so like I think that has no small effect on the collective psyche of Black people. Um, I also think, you know, to me, the way I kind of boil things down is uh, thinking of things in terms of the main cause or effect, and then the second or third order cause or effect. So, you know, the main cause and effect of I think the state of the Black community within the United States, or conditions that we face, is, you know, primarily due to racialized capitalism, and to the use of, you know, white supremacy and state violence against Black people to subjugate them, or to subjugate us. And there are second and third order effects that come out of that through, you know, indoctrination through schools that tell us false things about ourselves, and that, you know, erase our history. There's a dearth of resources that are literally pulled out of our communities. Um, uh, and there's the use of the state, or the use of the police to just essentially brutalize us. Honestly, it's like, it's kind of nonsensical sometimes when I think about it. And I think, you know, I think these are like, it's multiple conditions that are, you know, causing this, but it's important to look at like what the overall condition is, or the overall cause for everything is. I think it allows for a more holistic analysis and understanding of, you know, the issues that we face, and you know, most importantly, how to resolve them, in, you know, how to win.
Okay, well, thank you for that comment. Let me go to Dante now. You know, Dante, I like what KB had said about Dante. Are you there? I'm getting a feedback. Oh, Freedom, we're getting a feedback from you, Freedom. Okay, Dante, I want to see if we can reach a point where we can discuss how young people can do more to organize and get together in order to, let's say, save ourselves, so to speak. Now, I bring this to, you know, there was this report from the Jim Brady Foundation, which said that our gun-saturated country often forces officers to make split-second decisions. Our race-saturated history and the policies and structures that have developed as a result often puts Black Americans on the wrong end of them. The reason, and I'm saying the Jim Brady Institute Foundation here, the reason that racial justice requires community responsibility for accountable policing. How do you read that? Especially that last part when it says the
That
reason
sounds
that
a little anti-Black. So it sounds a bit anti-Black, but maybe I have to read it myself. But
oh, okay. Well, yeah, I understand, but it sounds to me like
it's like it's
That
Black people's fault for why
responsibility
they
for
get
the
killed.
violence
Yeah,
comes to us because we're not organized enough,
exactly.
or we're not doing something right. Um, so what you saying that you have to read that for us to really get what they're saying.
Well, from what I just heard from you,
Uh-huh.
it sounds like, oh, it's Black people's fault for why they're getting shot and killed by the police, right? And that's just ridiculous, in my view. But in terms of organization of our people, you know, uh, national oppression and racism work in so many different ways, right? And it affects us as well, right? Because national oppression, our communities have been broken up, our culture, our language, our common regional areas that we lived in. And then racism sort of divides, not only within our own community, but like within other racialized communities. You talk about Latinos and et cetera. And then, also breaks up the working class, right? So, we were seeing, well, in my view, the most important thing right now in terms of organizing young people is the labor movement. And why I'm saying that is because our enemies who control the police, this is all about political power at the end of the day, right? And the political is connected to the social and economic. And what we want for our people, where we're the majority or where we live or whatever, we want our voices heard. We want to control our lives, right? And not be bothered, as some might say, right? But, we want not only survival, but we want to advance our interests, right? And have housing, have healthcare, have childcare, have education, et cetera, right? So, and this means we need to be organized to win political power. So how do we do that? So one is through labor organizing, right? Where we spend probably 90% of our lives at work, right? In a workplace. And over 90% of Black people are workers, right? So we need to be organizing in the workplace where we are. And you can see like the efforts of Amazon, the Amazon Labor Union in Staten Island in New York. It's Black led by Chris Smalls and others. And that is something that we need to really be looking at. Even Starbucks workers, it's, probably on TV, you see predominantly white young people, but, there's still a lot of Black workers that do work at Starbucks. And then, there's other things happening that we don't know about that are Black led and, need to be, are either getting organized or need to be organized. And we need to be really thinking about connecting labor struggles with the Black liberation struggle, because these things are intermittently linked because of the statistic I just gave you, which was over 90% of Black people are working class. So that's super important. And with the police, these are people that directly affect our communities, but they also play a role in the labor movement, right? Like strike breaking, for example, right? So when workers go on strike, who comes in first to break up the strike? The police, right? Historically. Historically as well, in the past, during Jim Crow and even before that, they used Black people as scabs to basically break strikes as well, to divide Black workers from white workers, right? So, and that, you don't see that dynamic today, but that was a tactic used by, the capitalists, the business owners, the corporations, the rich, to basically divide up Black and white unity from that point. But anyways, what I'm trying to say is, the core issue, central issue is the struggle against racism, and to unite people around this issue, whether it be in the workplace or on the streets with police violence and housing, et cetera. And to win sort of political power, KB and I are in the Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression. And one of the core tenets of our work within that is, one, it's a mass defense organization, but within that, there's also struggle for, a radical reform, which is community control of the police, which means people that are directly affected in their communities by police violence, police interactions, anything to do with the police. We want full political power over that institution of policing, public safety, whatever you want to call it. And what that means is, we would have full fire and higher power. We can take away their pensions, we can destroy the contracts with the unions, and really change the sort of dynamic between the community and the police, which the police are controlled by what KB said, the state, which the state is backed by corporations and such. They're there to protect private property and enforce white supremacy, right? So those things are directly linked. And our role as Black organizers is to, one, expose the contradiction through, one, organizing, and two, political education, but then three, advancing and organizing people within this struggle to fight for actual political power over these institutions that continuously perpetuate violence against our people, kill our people, continuing to kill our people as we speak. And that's just super important. So to answer your question generally, there's two things: the labor movement, need to be organizing in the union movement, and also be struggling for militant leadership also in the Black liberation movement to fight for the here and now, for, not just democracy in the general sense, but to fight for liberation of our people, which will require, a strong labor movement and also a strong Black freedom movement, which could be youth-led as well. But, there's many issues that youth faced, but, all Black people face. And it's an all-class issue. The Black liberation, Black freedom movement is an all-class issue. So working class Black people are affected by racism and national oppression, but also, middle class and small business owners and big business owners, which is very few of us that are within that realm, are also affected by racism and national oppression. So those are people that we have to win over in a sense, but to these working class issues. And people should be joining the Alliance Against Racist and Political Oppression because it's putting these issues forefront, and it's a coalition organization. So, diversity in ideas, but unity in action, So, different organizations have different ideas, but, we come together in a coalition because we all see the issue at bay, which is police violence, which is killing our people. And these families that are victims of this violence want justice for their kids or their families. And we have to show solidarity and also fight as best as we can, and be as organized as we can, so we can, show up for these families, but also win, some radical reforms that can at least advance us to the next stage of struggle. So.
Okay, thank you for that. Let me go back to KB. I think she was chomping at the bits to say something there. So KB, with regards to what was said by what do you call it, the Jim Brady Foundation regarding community responsibility for accountable policing. It seems like they're saying, you guys aren't organizing in the community and getting them to, but tell me where they're wrong.
I mean, I think it's one, I don't know anything about the Jim Brady Foundation, but just based on the snippet that I just heard, it definitely sounds like white people, at the very least non-Black people, telling Black people what their problem is, which to me is always going to be incredibly chauvinist and incredibly just in just in bad faith, so I think that's kind of laughable because it puts the oppression of Black people on Black people who are the victims of the oppression. So it's like it's putting our the responsibility of freeing ourselves on us, which is a method of it's like absolving the people who are actually responsible and the institutions and the systems that are actually responsible for our oppression. It just absolves them of their role and just says that, you know, we as Black people need to act in these ways that, funnily enough, always tend to collate with and try to assimilate us into white supremacist power structures in order to, you know, be free. But, you know, I think kind of to what Dante's point, what he's speaking on, I look at it as the strategic alliance between oppressed nations within the United States, aligning with the multinational working class to seize power and to overthrow, you know, the institutions that and the systems that are responsible for our you know oppression, so that we're not oppressed anymore. And the way that, you know, you do that is through measures like community control of the police. You know, someone earlier asked in the chat, you know, about concrete solutions, because we kind of know what our problems are. And, you know, my estimation, you know, I think long term, I would like to see a complete, you know, abolishment of the police, a complete abolishment of, you know, the carceral system that has entrapped so many, you know, Black lives and has, you know, destroyed, you know, us as a community and has, you know, fractured us in so many ways. I want to see a complete abolishment of, you know, these evil systems. But what's important to focus on for us is, if we know that is a long-term goal, how do we actually do it? And for me, and you know, my comrades within the alliance, you know, the way that we think that we do that is through methods like community control of the police, where we are seizing back our power, where we're changing the power relationship that exists between us and the state and the you know, militant arm of the state, which is the police, and saying that we have the power to hire, to fire, to take away pensions, to control the disciplinary process of the police, to make the police actually accountable to the communities they supposedly serve. You know, and through that control, you are able to you know, abolish, or you're able to, you know, defund the police. You know, I think of it similar to how, you know, Social Security is a program that is controlled by the government, and that, you know, we haven't seen a complete abolishment of Social Security overnight. It has been a slow, gradual process that has essentially squeezed life out of the program through systemic defunding of, you know, the program and other social services. And I look at something like that the government does day in and day out, and I think, why can't we do that as Black people? Why can't we do that as oppressed people, as people who are, you know, having the boot of the state like violently put on our necks every single day? And the way to do that is through community control, through seizing back that power, and by telling, you know, the state essentially that we are going to put the parameters on what the police can and cannot do. And by that method, you know, we can abolish this, we can defund it, because the power is within us to do that. So yeah.
We, I am tempted to ask a question coming back, but let me get to Baba Congo, who has his hands up. He probably has a question for either you or Dante, I'm not sure. Baba Congo.
Greetings. I thank everybody to be here on hot Friday. But sometimes we have to look at where things begin. A couple of things begin. If you look at Hollywood, Hollywood produced a lot of violent films, a lot of violent jokes, and things that are not good. There's things that are, some documentaries are good, but the thing is, that's one bad thing that and we as Black people, we watch more TV and go to more movies than anyone else. I got that from Dick Gregory when he was alive. Most school systems have gotten rid of their truant officers. So kids who are not going to school, there's no, there's no balance there to say like, hey, you should be in school. Sometimes the parents don't know that the kids are not in school until they start failing. But there's another thing that I find that's interesting. A used computer and a used gun cost about the same thing. Okay, most of the violence, I can almost, I'm not scientific, but I have a feeling quite a few people who have guns don't have a computer. With a computer, you can create yourself a job and make a living. Wherever there's, whenever you're not making a living or you don't have jobs, you have crime. So that's a cause and effect thing that I find. We're not accustomed to this because before the Europeans got to Africa, Africa had no prisons. We found different ways of taking care of our delinquents and things like that. But anyway, so sometimes I find like, here's somebody that doesn't have a job, then when he gets $500-600, he goes and buy a used gun, another used computer. We need a gun to liberate ourselves, but we need a computer to keep ourselves liberated. And so anyway, I'd like to see if we can go all the way back to like, hey, we don't have good schools, our kids don't go to the good schools, and if someone is educated, they're most likely not to commit violent crimes. I'm not a scientist that have numbers to back that up, but I think that's common sense. But anyway, that's what I'd like to say, and see if we could shift a little bit and attack some of the points that I have. Thank you.
Okay, you're putting that you for both of our guests. Anybody can answer that at the moment. If you get the drift of what Baba Congo is putting forward. You want to tackle that, Dante?
I can try, but
Well, I picked on you because I'm sure you've been messing around with computers and all that kind of stuff, and you're a
well,
man. Do you think that it's an effective method of building the hopes and opportunities for the young people?
Well, I think there's a core issue that Brother Congo was getting at, but I didn't see the relationship between the laptop and the gun, because white people can easily, rich white people mostly, I'm saying, but they can easily buy a laptop and a gun, multiple guns probably, and but like the point I think you were trying to say was, someone that's poor, working class, you know, if they're in a neighborhood with a bunch of, like, let's say a gang or something like that or whatnot, they may be enticed to possibly go for the gun first just to either protect themselves or, you know, do something like that. I mean, I see that correlation, but I think there's some more root to it than just going to a store and seeing those two things next to each other. And I think that is, well, one, we live in a violent society. So one, there's always a sort of a fear of, you know, being killed or, you know, coming into the world as a Black young person, you know, either having a choice between prison or death, right? You know, that's kind of, when I grew up in my neighborhood in California, that's kind of was like the thing. You know, I was attracted to gang violence as well when I was growing up in California, because I had a lot of family that were in prison, incarcerated because of, you know, their gang activities. But I think what, you know, what the core thing that Brother Congo was basically saying was like, you know, we're not in well-funded schools. There's not a lot of programs for young people, like after school, like folks that are in the public school system, like in whatever middle school or elementary or even high school, like there's nothing to do after school. So, you know, they look for an organized group or friends that, you know, may not be into certain things, that might be, you know, advancing liberatory interests. It might be more backwardness, whether it be, I don't know, let's say drug use or gun culture, which I don't, that's probably the wrong term to be using, but, you know, gang violence typically, right? That's kind of what I was growing up in. And, you know, but like what KB was saying earlier, you know, there were programs that existed as a result of liberation movements, not only from the Black Panther Party and like the Young Lords of like the 60s, but even before then, with the communist movements and the CIO, and labor was very strong at one point. So, you know, there was a lot of opportunities for good jobs, good union jobs, for young people like in high school, etc. But when the unions started getting destroyed in the 50s during the McCarthy period and continuing through the 60s and 70s, this was like a slow process. You can kind of see like the sort of neoliberalization of the United States, right? So in the late 70s, early 80s, you know, on the onset of the last term of Nixon and Ronald Reagan coming in, you know, you see the mass incarceration going skyrocketing and more police violence. So there was more, there was basically what I mean by neoliberalization is like the shrinking of the social safety net that was won through the fights of the 30s and 40s through the Depression, the New Deal, and even fights through the 50s and 60s as well. And all that basically got rolled back in the late 70s, early 80s, and then through the 90s with Clinton as well. And, you know, people lost their pensions, people got fired, their unions got destroyed. And, you know, youth lost all of their after school programs and youth jobs and all these things. And, you know, what came out of all that was gang violence and mass incarceration and more police violence and interactions and bloated budgets and all these things that went more of a reactionary route in this country, which was targeted towards Black people. And then you can also link to even the drug trade, right, which was directly linked to the war in Nicaragua, the civil war against the Contras, which were trying to overthrow the revolutionary government of the Sandinistas, which was funded by the US government, Ronald Reagan and George Bush Sr. And they were trading weapons for drugs, and, you know, drugs were funneling into Los Angeles, etc. And this became, you know, what some term like turf wars and gang violence in LA and Compton and elsewhere, and that stuff trickled over the country. And, you know, we're still, a lot of that violent period of that sort of stuff has like kind of trickled away, but it's still the same core issue, which is capitalism in a sense. But, you know, coming out of COVID, for example, there's supposedly an uptick in violence, in DC and elsewhere, right? And you know, intercommunal within the Black community, or just generally speaking, violence has gone down since like the 90s, where it was at a height. And there's like this little spike that's happened during this COVID period, and it's mostly a result of the COVID response. People have lost jobs or underpaid, or they're working too many jobs. So like the parents of these young people have 3-4 jobs to make ends meet, and their kids are probably going to school, and then getting involved with other activities, and getting involved with violent or just crime, as the society terms it, right? And and there's a direct relationship to jobs, as Brother Congo was saying. We need good jobs for youth, but we need youth programs, we need well-funded schools, we need all types of stuff. We need supportive teachers so they can do more for the students, and they're already doing a lot themselves, but they need to be paid well, etc. And there's all this funding for the war in Ukraine, for example, and there's nothing for the people of the city or this country. And there's a direct relationship between all these things. It's just a deterioration of the society, and who gets hit first? The oppressed communities, which in particular, it's Black communities here in the United States, just given the history of our people. And it's just creating a more backwardness of the people through, just complete, lack of resources and lack of political power, and and the continued occupation of the communities through police and militarization of police and all of that. So, so I don't want to drag on too long, but, there's things that Brother Congo was saying that I think are true, but then there was some correlations that I don't think were direct. Well, they're related, but not directly, because there's more foundational issues in terms of what KB was saying, which is like resources for our communities. So I'll leave it there.
Just to kind of briefly add on to that, I think what Congo was also talking about is goes into that dearth of resources, and how Dante mentioned it earlier, but 90% of Black people are workers, and we know that the relative wealth of Black people is several orders of magnitude lower than that for like white people. Like I haven't looked at the statistics in years, but the last time I looked at Black wealth statistics, it was like around 4,700 for the average Black family versus 120,000 for the average white family. And so, Black parents who are overworked, who are working, insane hours each week to simply provide the basic necessities for themselves and their children, don't have the capacity or the range to, supervise their children, I guess, in a way that would be ultimately beneficial when you're working all the time. Young kids are going to find community where they can, because I think within all of us, it comes out of an evolutionary process of wanting to be in community with each other. I think that is a instinctual need for people that directly comes out of how we have evolved to exist within this world, which is primarily through community. So people seek out a sense of belonging, and in areas where you don't have access to resources or productive outlets and pursuits, people will find themselves within structures that are destructive for themselves or for the people around them simply because of a desire to be in community, with others. And so I think kind of the issues that Congo was talking about goes back to the oppression of Black people in racialized capitalism that robs us of the time to spend with our families, the time to spend building relationships with the people that are around us, and that causes us to, as Black parents, to be overworked, underpaid and underappreciated. So that's it.
Okay, KB, I do see where you're going with that, and also Dante, I do understand quite a bit of what you're saying, but let me get into the chat. There's someone in the chat who is asking, does anyone have about the MORE Act in Congress? Does that, I have no idea what that is. Let me see. Kwame, are you on the mic? Could you?
Yes, I am. Greetings.
Okay. Let me the knowledge about the MORE Act in Congress. Can you give us an idea of what that's all about? Because I have no idea what that is. And that is that spelled right? MORE.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, in brief, it is a bill that's being introduced once again to Congress to federally decriminalize cannabis, expunge records, help fund those who've been adversely affected by the war on drugs, to fund them entering into the legal market of cannabis, to open up more research. It is basically, I think Chuck Schumer of New York and Cory Booker are the two people who have introduced this bill. It was introduced to Congress last year, but the Senate wouldn't see it. Mr. McConnell, they said, we ain't even gonna look at it. Well, it's being introduced again this year. And it's, in a way, to me, it's a way where they can start repairing some of the damage that this war on drugs has caused in our community, that Nixon started back in 1971 with the Controlled Substance Act that placed cannabis as a Schedule I controlled substance on the same category as heroin, which is a bold-faced lie, and it's still listed there. And so by being a Schedule I controlled substance, universities can't do the research to see the medical benefits, and companies can't do the research to see the economic and industrial benefits that it will have for the people and the planet, because they have to get permission from the DEA in order to do the research. So they basically have suppressed the use and benefits of this plant at the same time using it to lock up Black people and arrest Black people and put them in prison. You know, they might not get caught with, they can stop you and say, we smell something, and start searching you. You know, so it's a way to kind of ease up on this war on the Black family, that's been taking place since we first encountered the European on the shores of Africa. I mean, it's just, the war just continues to change stripes. And that's like I posted in thing. I mean, they spending $800 billion a year on a war budget. Martin Luther King said that, the greatest purveyor of violence on the planet is this country, and it still is today. And that's the problem. All this money is going to these wars of imperialist aggression, you know what I'm saying? And the dollar continues to lose its value because of inflation. This is nothing new. So we work more for less every single year because we're being robbed of our labor, of our wealth, holding on to this currency, this dollar. When the wealthy takes this dollar bill and exchanges it for assets, we spend it on stuff. So, I mean, but that's the MORE Act. And I started ramping, but that's basically what the MORE Act is about, to end the prohibition of cannabis on a federal level and try to start repairing some of the damage that cannabis prohibition has caused in the Black community.
Mhm. Yes, sir. You know, from what you've said and what I've heard from Dante and Christian, you know, uh, maybe you're right about quite a few things there, but I have to ask this question. And before that, let me no, let me ask the question. Your response to the empathy coming from, let's say, the community. Now, you know what I mentioned earlier, the Jim Brady accusation. Well, I shouldn't say that. It's their conclusion as to what Black folks should be doing in their community. They're workers. Some of them are unionized. They're you know, but that's not in every community, and they're not concentrated. Usually, when we have poverty, it's a concentrated thing, and a whole lot of people may be working and not very well paid. So when you're organizing, in your approach, do you go to that part of the community and say, well, we need to organize, whether they're young or old, you need to come with us and organize. Do you get any kind of empathy from them for what you're doing?
So you mean like empathy from
Yeah, and in other words, are they supportive, or do they, whether morally or financially, or are you going to to the communities that are highly affected by this issue of violence?
oh yeah, I think that's the crux of the type of organizing that we do is you have to develop like a understanding of the issues that people are facing and what they're going through, and you know, guided by a commitment to, you know, dialectical practice, meaning commitment to understanding the conditions of the society that we live in, and historically what has happened in this country, and historically what has happened in other countries, and how they've solved these issues using these two methods to come together and to try to problem solve, and address the you know, conditions that people face, you know, and that takes having interaction with the people who are directly, you know, affected, and hearing their stories and building relationships, and making inroads with people, to show that you know, we have a common interest, and that we have like that we shouldn't feel disempowered or dispossessed, that, you know, the things that can result in transformational change in our lifetimes are you know, the power within us, and the power within, you know, a collective of people latching together that are committed to a common goal, you know, using that collective power for our benefit and for our interests. So I think, you know, as an organizer, as a activist person committed to change, and someone aware of these, you know, I definitely think that's necessary. That's the basis of our activism and our organizing.
Okay. All right, thank you. Now, let me go to Dante. It's a similar question, but this in essence is, what about the representatives of these areas where people are living? They're usually Black politicians. They're you know, and you know, they should be representing people. Now, we've got more Black politicians in every position you can think about than we've had, let's say, a generation ago. We've got tons of them. Are they doing any better than if you had a white politician or white politicians controlling? And how effective could your organizing be in bringing pressure to these people to make them work for, do the job they're supposed to be doing, and that is representing their people and getting them out of this malaise.
Yeah, well, I think there's some historic things. So, like, probably when you were younger, Bob Mosley, one of the major fights was to just get Black people in political office in like Black majority areas, right? It led to Black mayorships around the country, Detroit, Cleveland, elsewhere. And then, maybe the 80s or so, you started getting a lot more folks in Congress. And, going into today's era, with the Congressional Black Caucus and those such on the national level. And then in the local level, you got a lot of Black women mayors, for example, Mayor Bowser here in DC, and elsewhere. You got like Eric Adams in New York, right? So, there's a big, in my view, contradiction with a lot of these, sort of Black representatives. And what I look to is an example of a city council member that was in Harlem in the 1940s, which was a communist, Ben Davis. And, he was basically independents of the two-party system, Democrats and Republicans, and came out of the sort of progressive party, American Labor Party of that time in New York, which they had a very well-organized Jewish and Black community in Harlem that led to his election, and he was eventually ousted through the McCarthyite attacks. And they changed the electoral laws where they got rid of basically ranked choice voting at that time to keep it in the two-party hands, the Republicans and Democrats in that area, that bureau. So now it's just a fight within basically the Democratic Party, right? And where the big D Democrat base includes, Latinos, Black people, women, LGBTQ folks, and by base I mean these people that vote for them, right? And it leads to some of these representatives being elected. But the Democratic Party is not a working class or a community party, right? It's completely controlled by big capitalist interests, big corporations, Google, Amazon, yada yada, the big defense contractors, the military, etc. So basically a Black person within that setup is a token, in my view. And they're just there to basically be a pawn of the ruling class. But that does not mean that, you cannot elect a fighter. You have, what's the brother's name that was from Oakland? Ron Dellums. That was, making that right, from Oakland. He was a Congress member in the 80s, and, struggled against, apartheid in South Africa, challenged people within the Congress, and etc. I mean, he wasn't perfect, a lot of contradictions, and you're working within a space that has a lot of reaction within it. But he was very popular and supported by the community in Oakland and elsewhere. And then you got someone like, let's say, Barbara Lee, right? Which, she actually comes out of progressive background. She worked for Ron Dellums as a staff member, but, she's basically, within this whole BS of the two-party system. So I think, one, there's splits within sort of the two-party political apparatus that some Black people that could come out of the communities and be elected could fight, but some are completely bought and bossed, as to flip around the Shirley Chisholm words, are just completely, antagonistic to their own people, and voting for bills and all these resolutions that are for the military-industrial complex, for war, that's completely against our people's interests as Black people and as even working class people. And then on a local level, Mayor Bowser is completely in the bed with real estate developers. She's completely advancing the interest of the big gas companies and the gentrifiers and pushing Black people out of the city. And she's not the only one. You know, there was Mayor Williams before her and other folks. You know, Marion Barry is loved here in the city. You know, people call him Mayor for life because he got a lot of Black people jobs in the city and such. So, you know, there's still, you know, I think this is still like a sort of a touchy subject to some people, you know, generationally. But I think a lot of young people like myself, you know the limitations within the sort of electoral political representation space. And, you know, in my view, we should use all tactics possible to fight for political power, even though we know it's not going to lend ourselves to liberation. But we need to be fighting on all fronts of political fights, whether it be fighting for a resolution or amendment in the city councils, or just fighting on the streets, protests, or even trying to get someone in office or in a local advisory neighborhood commissioner office, because, you know, we need all avenues of struggle. That's my view. We can't just like get pissed off and sit everything out and just, you know, let these right-wing groups take over. So so to answer your question, you know, there's a big, I think, contradiction going into these sort of political spaces as a Black person. And a lot of them are not actually from the communities that they represent, or, you know, they might have just slipped in and, you know, had a lot of money through these PACs and big business and all this stuff. So, but there is a history of some folks coming out of the community and representing them, like Coleman Young in Detroit. But, you know, he wasn't perfect, made a lot of mistakes. And, you know, I think the communities and the organizations need to learn from that and see, you know, what needs to be done to improve the conditions generally. Is it completely separating ourselves from creating a new political system, or do we fight on the enemy's ground, the enemy's turf, and fight within that, or do we do both? These are questions that I think we should always be thinking about and discussing and debating. And you know, it's not easy. Organizing is not easy.
That's for sure. So, yes. Well, thank you. Now, you know, after saying that, I'm wondering. Right here in Washington D.C., you just mentioned it. I mean, it's practically, what is it, a 90% or more representative Black representation in the council? I mean, don't you see any of these, especially the young politicians? Don't you see any of them? I mean, coming out of, let's say, what is it, Southeast and those areas where you have a lot of these issues with violence. And I see the young politicians there and some young people, activists there, active political folks, and even a councilman. They seem to be trying to do things. But again, it's within the system. And like you said, the hurdles that they have to get over to get anything done. It seems to me that Black people may have to do something a little more radical than hiring, voting somebody into office. Now, you know, as a person who is in the UNIACL, you know, I have to mention Marcus Garvey had said that, you know, self-reliance is where we need to be. Marcus Garvey, I'm sure you might have had some history concerning how he organized Black people, the largest organization that Black people have seen in this country and maybe the entire world in modern times. He too was the victim of the machinations of the state. So you know, it's not easy organizing, but yet still he did that without TV, cell phone, all the modern amenities when it comes to communication. But he was out there knocking on doors, talking to folks. Should we be doing that? Shouldn't we be getting back to that point where we will make Black people believe in us and what we're saying, to the point where their organized position they're in is scary to the system, because he was victimized because they were scared of it. We think that organizing Black folks to be self-reliant, to be conscious of who they are in their history. Now, I know you might have read that some stuff on that he was maybe anti-communist, which was a lie, and all that stuff. That was not true. As a matter of fact, he communicated with Lenin and congratulated him on the revolution and what he was doing for the people of Russia. So, you know, people will always do things to divide us, to the point where the division was strong in the United States and the Communist Party. He became an enemy to the UNIA, not communism, I may add, or socialism, but the Communist Party, which is the Socialist Party, whatever it is, in New York, because number one, they're trying to steal the members. They would take members away from the UNIA. The best members, they went after them and all that sort of stuff, because they couldn't understand this organizing. How was it going like that? He wasn't the only one. I mean, the NAACP and all kinds of people.
That's right. That the African blood.
Organizing Black folks means getting into the minds of Black folks. And to the minds of Black folks, it's self-knowledge, history, etc. Being aware of who you are. Education being very important. Education for our young people starting from day one. And what has been, I think, is happening to our young people is shooting themselves, or they have no knowledge of self. If you expect a system controlled by your enemy to educate your children so that they may be self-reliant and hopeful for the future, I don't think your mind is in the right place. So for us in the UNIA, it's making people, young people, be aware of who they are, clearing their minds of this effect of white supremacy. They are not supreme. So that's in a nutshell for what we're saying that. But I'm saying the objective is getting young people to love themselves, meaning you look at a brother or a sister and you don't think that's an enemy. Immediately it's someone, you know, of your community that you're willing to help and walk along the street holding hands, friendly and lovingly. What we're getting in most of these cities, Detroit, Washington, D.C., New York, you name any large city where young people, I mean, let's face it, I mean, what are the statistics? 21 to 1 or something like that. 21 Black people, young Black men. 21 times they're being killed. When you put that against young white people who are being killed. To me, that's a conspiracy. We need to look in those areas where there might be subliminal questions or subliminal messages going to our young people, so to destroy us. Now, I may be being a little far-fetched for those who were with a scientific mind, but hey, it's how I see it. Anyway, bro, I promised you 8:30, and I want to thank you and KB for coming on. I want to thank you for your presentations. I'm hoping that we can do this again at some point, if that's okay with you, because we want to hear the positions of young people, okay? I see we have Baba Senghor has his hands up, and I would like to say something. Baba Senghor?
Yes, sir.
Mhm.
First of all, thank you both for joining us. As the first Assistant President General of the UNIA and a former President General for 8 years, I got to speak truth to power. There's nothing new about the killing in America. America is a killing country, a killing white supremacy system. The question becomes, is how do we as African people come up with solutions to stop the killing, period. There's many conversations that we've had in the past. Appreciate everything that's been shared, but I'm gonna be straight to the point. Baba Mosi is absolutely correct. Until we take matters into our own hands, and I don't mean me fire with fire, I mean blow the fire out with water. We got the power. We don't have the consciousness nor the vision to police our own community. The biggest gang in America is the Popo of America. It was established to come after those who were runaways during slavery. That's what it was established for. So the concept of the killing that we're doing amongst ourselves has been programmed into our brothers and sisters who do not know themselves and think guns are power. It's what's behind the gun is power. And until African people at home and abroad wake up and go to the communities and protect our communities, and I mean from the Popo too. I mean, and I'm gonna close on this point, and I've been saying it for a while, Baba Mosi, I gotta drop it. We got Africans with jobs that carry guns to protect federal buildings. But the Pan-African nationalists and the communists and the socialists and all the progressives have yet to come up with the economic power to fund the brothers and sisters who have the skills to protect Black people from themselves and from the police department or departments. It is critical that we speak truth to power whenever we talk about violence. Politics in America is not going to ever, black, green, gray, or orange, change the nature of what is taking place. It has never happened while we were in chattel slavery, while we in political and prison slavery now. It's continuing to happen. And I hate to say it, we're gonna lose more until we wake up. But know that Marcus Garvey and those who work with Garvey were absolutely correct. When African people rise to our traditional greatness, we will not only police ourselves, we will create our own military, and we will take charge of the world. So we're not gonna lose. We're losing too many of us from violence. But it's not just in North America. We lose more Africans in South America every day than anywhere on the planet. Next is Africa. So we need to wake up. That's where the majority of Africans are, in South America and Africa, not in North America. However, North America plays a role with leading white supremacy. And until Yurugu is addressed properly with power, we're gonna continue to see the killing. But anyway, I just had to say that because I'm impressed with everything we're talking about here. But don't be hoodwinked to think any politician, I don't care who it is, we didn't have a Black man in the White House, ain't nobody gonna change what America's been built on but the people. What just happened in Sri Lanka is a perfect example of people power. However, our people power has to be a power that's involved with organizing not just militias, but our own ways to police and protect our women, children, and particularly young Black men who are now emulating Yurugu by killing each other. So I just had to say that. Thank y'all. And we gotta speak truth to power though, because the only way out of this is to speak truth to power and continue doing the organizing, and we will meet you at the table. Anybody that's sincere about uplifting Black people, the UNIA will meet you at the table. In Africa, in North America, in South America, in Europe, and anywhere we are. So Baba Mosi, thank you again for a powerful forum, but I had to come in. This is not just a local thing. Many of us are parent body members on the government of the UNIA, and Marcus Garvey is the only man or person that's ever been elected as the president of all of Africa. I want to say that because until we get back to that, controlling Africa, we're never going to be able to control communities wherever Africans are. In the Congo alone, if we take that alone, we can feed the world. One God, one aim, one destiny.
Thank you, sir. You're right on. You're right. It's 8:45. I promised to be there done at 8:30. KB, Dante, love you guys. All right. See you next time. Give thanks. Yes, indeed. My sister, Terry, glad to have you on. Kwame. All right. Everybody, thank you very much for being on. And until we do this again, Brother Heru, take us out. One God, one aim, one destiny.